Hey everyone, today is Earth Day, April 22nd, 2022. I hope everyone out there is having a great green Earth Day. I'm sitting here with composer JaRon Brown, one of our series for composers. Super excited to have JaRon on the line today. And without further ado, JaRon Brown. Woo!
Yo, thanks for
Welcome.
super excited and happy Earth Day.
Yeah, definitely. So, Jaron, thank you so much for taking the time, obviously, to talk. Super excited to talk with you about your piece, what you've been up to, and everything like that. So, what have you been up to? I know you've been writing a couple pieces. Anything you can tell us about?
Yeah, so I've been working on a few pieces. I recently finished marimba and vibe duet that premiered on one of my really good friends' recital recently, and it went really well. It's entitled Azur's Rumalad, and it's basically about like anime and that whole like game world that I loved so much. And
Nice.
yeah, and I'm also working. Well, I finished a choral piece, which is so like new for me, and it's set to premiere very soon, within the next week or so, by the Dutch Folk Choral Society. So I'm pretty stoked about that as well. I've never written for choir, so that in itself was a lot, but also like super. It was cool. Like I can't be. I couldn't be anything less than happy about all of this. So yeah.
That's awesome. For these different pieces you've been composing and working on, what's the best way for people to check out some of these videos, recordings, just anything like that?
Yeah, so I am, of course, an artist on Wildlife Publications. So that's really a great place to look for all of any of my pieces that of course, releasing with them. But also check out my Instagram. It's Roseboy. It's Roseboy Red. I'm always posting stuff, music related and not music related. So it's a really good place to like really get to know me. But also, I share a lot of my works there, of course. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So definitely go check out Jaron on all the socials. Um, and we're excited to check out all of those pieces as well as, what you're writing for Green Vibes this series.
Yeah.
You mentioned you wrote a choral piece. Now, for those that don't know, Jaron and I go back. We met at the University of South Carolina. I was working on my performance master's, and Jaron was working on a bachelor's in percussion and composition. Do you find like you enjoy writing for percussion the most, even though like you just wrote something like for a choral situation, which you've haven't done before? What are your thoughts? Do you like branching out? Where are you at with that?
I love branching out. I feel like I will always have this like innate love for percussion, just because like it's where I started. But I'm never gonna like limit myself to only just doing, of course, works for percussion. I feel like it's funny because like I've recently only been writing for percussion, which is cool because I get it. It's naturally my thing. But yeah, like I've written a lot of things. Like I've written for, of course, winds, and I want to do more of that and just like expand my horizons, just because I learn a lot from using different instruments and thinking of music differently when I incorporate other instruments into the mix. So yeah, broaden the spectrum.
Yeah. And fun fact, I actually played on a chamber piece of Duran's back in
Oh
my master's. I believe that was Giant Woman.
yeah, dude, that piece is so cool.
Yeah. Now that was a percussion trio or quartet with bass clarinet?
Yeah, it was wait, what was oh yeah, it's a trio with
Trio.
yeah. I was like, whoa, I had to think about that for a second.
So Duran's been, here and there and everywhere writing all kinds of cool stuff. And I had talked with Duran back when I was in my master's about a piece. And we went back and forth for a bit. And I think with just life, everything got kind of put on pause. And then when Series 4 was rolling around, I was like, all right, we have to make this happen.
Yeah.
So super excited. So why don't we flip the script a little bit here and actually talk about Series 4, talk about the piece.
Word.
You
Um
want
Yeah, so like, so this piece really interesting, and I say that about all the pieces that I write. Oh, they sound so different, or like this is new for me. But like, I sincerely feel like this is a new experience for me with this piece. It's entitled "No Music on a Dead Planet," which has so much lore just in the title alone. Exactly, yes. Like, there's so much lore. It's such a cool title, and I'm happy that we came up with that together. Like, that was just something that, like, when we had the initial conversation about writing for series 4 and like doing a piece together, like, I remember you said that title to me because it was from an organization, and just like hearing that just was just so incredible. I was like, oh yeah, this is a title, like this is a piece. So anyways, it came together really nicely. So yeah, the lore behind the piece itself, before I start spinning or overthinking it. Um, so essentially, I was like, oh yeah, this title is really cool, but like, like, how can we tell a story? So essentially, the piece is very dark and moody, but I wanted to create something that like reflected that, because I feel like a lot of my works are very animated and bubbly and just like colorful and pretty. So like, this is kind of the opposite. But yeah, so it's about this astronaut in space, and like he gets this like distress call from this being that is like basically saying help me. So it's like this like ghost. So I feel like that's a really great place to start.
Well, here
Um
in JaRon, why don't I share the cover real quick? So because I think it goes perfectly with what you're talking about.
yeah.
All right.
Oh,
So hopefully
oh.
everyone can see that.
Yeah, it's lit. Yeah, it's the cover's so cool. I really I really enjoy. I feel like one of the things I really love about like being a composer is like the cover art. I think it adds so much like depth to like what I was thinking, or like what we were thinking in creating this work. So I just feel like it just there's so much to talk about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And if it's all right, just to we were talking about the title "No Music," or sorry, yeah, "No Music on a Dead Planet." That is a slogan JaRon and I had found and talked about. It's from an organization over in Europe called Music Declares Emergency, and I want to give them a shout out just real quick. Their whole organization, and I'll just read this tagline from their website here. Music Declares Emergency is a group of artists, music industry professionals, and organizations that stand together to declare climate and ecological emergency and call for an immediate governmental response to protect all life on Earth. That just really hit me hard a couple years ago when I found that organization, and I've kept up with them over the years and things like that. And so when Series 4 was rolling around, I had that in the back of my head. And like JaRon was saying, we talked about it and we're like, this is such a story to be told through music. So this is really, really special for me as well. And shout out to Music Declares. You can find all of them on socials on IG, MDE, Music Declares Emergency. So go check them out as well. So
Yeah, it's like it's such a powerful statement. I
mhm.
feel like I said, there's so much lore in just the title alone. It could go in so many different directions. So like I said, I'm honored that like that was like that nugget was placed in my hands.
It's awesome. It is meant to be.
Yeah.
I think so. Absolutely. Well, we can go two ways here, Dron. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the piece itself, movement one and movement two, their titles, or we can get a little bit more meta with it and talk about some inspiration for composition. Which way do you want to go with this?
I mean, I don't really have a preference. I feel like either way is cool. So
All right, let's talk about some more inspiration, and then we'll jump back to the piece itself. So obviously, we're talking about this lore with no music on a dead planet. When you're writing, do you have to have the inspiration? Do you not? And if you have it, where do you pull it from?
yeah, I feel like Well, yes, definitely. Just personally for me and my experience, a lot of my music I feel like is very authentic to me. So there's some sort of like story that is connected to why I wrote this or why it is the way that it is. So yes, so I feel like most of it's most of the pieces that I write are very emotional or emotionally driven because I'm just naturally emotional. But
Mhm.
I feel like it just adds so much more depth to the idea. So attaching some sort of story or making some sort of like concept to go along with it just naturally fits everything that I do. So yes, indeed.
So I mean, essentially, I mean, every piece you write, there's a little bit of you, a little bit of your soul in all of it.
Definitely my soul. Like I really try to put that. I not try to. I just feel like it innately happens
Mm.
because I'm really invested, and I just want to make sure that I'm doing something that's honest and I'm giving a genuine recount of like the idea that I'm trying to give. So yes,
That's
definitely.
awesome. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. That's really cool. Well, so talking about inspiration, then let's go back over to the piece itself. So it's two movements.
Yeah.
Um, and if you could talk about the titles of each movement for a second, I'm sure everyone would love to hear about that.
Yeah. So okay. So essentially, we kind of had an idea to do like a multi-movement work, but I really didn't know like what that was. Just like it's like I've never written anything like that. So I was like, okay, well, cool. So of course I was like, well, let's do something slow and maybe like contrast with something a little bit that's not slow. So the first movement is called Help Yourself, You're a Ghost, which like harkens back to that idea of like that distress call that this astronaut's getting. And yeah, so it's very slow and brooding. And a lot of the ideas in this piece uses kind of how can I, what's the best way I can describe it? So like one of the techniques that we use is like using buzzes on the vibes just to create this kind of like just like this like readiness or like interference, and then heavy like chords that are like just create this like angst or aggression with this really lush electronic backing that's always forever changing and moving and shifting and creating this atmosphere of being in space. So yeah, like ghosts are real.
That's so cool. And here, if we're gonna take a pause real quick on our Zoom, and I'm gonna drop in a little bit of the backing track from movement one. So here, check this out. This is a little bit from Help Yourself because You're a Ghost, the first movement of No Music on a Dead Planet. All right. So that was a little bit of the backing track from the first movement of the piece. Um, is there anything you want to share specifically about movement two? Why don't we talk about the title for that movement as well? And I'll pull up the score while JaRon's giving everyone a little bit of background information.
Yeah, so the second movement is fast. It's called They Ate All the Freaking Static. So there was this song that I heard that's called Static Eaters. It's like rock influence, but like also kind of like glitchy. I can't think of the artist off the top of my head just because of course you can't. But so yeah, so that and then another artist that I really was listening to during this time was his name is Ruby My Dear. He's a French musician, and his music is very glitchy and angsty. So this kind of drove the idea of like static and like these like beings being vicious and um aggressive. So yeah, so this is very much so different than the first movement. It's fast, it's lively, it's aggressive, there's screaming. It's like what we need screaming.
For a piece like this, absolutely.
Yeah, like we need that stuff. And funny thing, like no music, you would essentially think, okay, so we're gonna do something kind of like sparse and like, atmospheric and like use different sound effects. Oh no, not me. You I decided to, of course, go do the opposite, which is what I tend to do with a lot of things. So there's a lot of music. But it's interesting. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about the instrumentation here for just a second. I'm pulling up the list from the score, but JaRon, yeah, if you wouldn't mind talking about that for a moment.
Yeah, so of course vibraphone, snare drum, then trash cans. So like I feel like with the Green Vibes project, I feel like it makes sense to use stuff like that. And they create this really nice, thuddy, like dark sound that I'm just so attracted to. I love a lot of like snare and bass drum combos. So I feel like that was um a nice like meld or amalgam. And then 5 resonant metal scraps, found objects, of course, you can't go wrong with that. And it also adds to the whole atmosphere of the piece. So yeah, you use all of these simultaneously. There's a lot, it's very vibraphone heavy. But of course, in the second movement, it's just like wild. It's like you have to play everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah. So I love how you were talking about with Green Vibes. It kind of makes sense. Some of the best memories with this project are going out to a junkyard and finding an old keg to hit, or finding and experimenting with the composer to find new sounds that are not traditional instruments in the least. So JaRon and I just recently started that road of going down trying to find sound samples and what we want. And just to give everyone a little bit of background with that, the process that Green Vibes does is we'll typically find different repurposed things like metal scraps, like JaRon wrote for his piece, and actually set up a microphone, record some sound samples of the different metals, and actually have a whole back and forth with our composers about sound profiles and timbres and things like that. So we were just talking about metals earlier before we jumped on the Zoom call, and I'm still working on finding the trash can sound. I'd rather use a trash can rather than a large drum. Sorry, having trouble talking today. But like JaRon wrote, for either way it'll work. But that section is pretty groovy and pretty intense, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah. A lot of it's just like, honestly, like I remember when we talked about this essentially, like because this piece went in so many different directions at first. But I remember like when I finally fleshed out the idea, I was like, dude, I don't really care about dynamics. I just want it to all be loud. Like
Yeah.
I'm aggressive and just like not really care about any of this stuff because it it needs to be. It feels like that's the case. So
Yeah. And that's something that Series 4 really has taken on with all of the composers this time around. Everything is very much more intense, in your face, to the point, blunt. So I think this all goes in line perfectly. So
yeah.
well, one other thing about recycled instruments and things like that. Um, how much have you written for regarding untraditional instruments, recycled, repurposed? Is this the first kind of time doing something like that?
Yeah, this is actually the first. I wrote a piece called Gutterflies that like uses a lot of like knick-knack percussion. So it's not really like found or I mean you have the opportunity to be creative with that kind of stuff, but it's not as like specific as this has been. So I the only thing that I wish I had done is used more of it because like there's so many different sound palettes that you can create when you think, oh my god, this is gonna sound so cliche, but out of the box. Like, yeah. So yeah, man. But this is yeah. So this is generally speaking, or genuinely speaking, this is the first time that I've done something like this. So, but
Okay.
yeah,
Is it has it been I don't want to just say neat, but you're not writing for a clarinet. You're not writing for necessarily just a vibraphone. Like, do you feel like it opens more doors? Like, we're not just pandering, I would hope. Um, but my attempt in using like repurposed and recycled instrumentation is to even push the boundary more. It's the idea of, everything could be music, everything could be an instrument. At least
Yeah,
that's the approach I take.
yeah, like yeah, it's that it alleviates well for me thinking of like as like compose like the sounds that I just like I imagine, but I don't know how to create them. So like you have the opportunity to think outside of the box. So
Yeah.
like the opportunity to use something that's like unconventional to create a specific sound. So it becomes even more so unique, even more so native to that idea. And it opens the possibilities to what this can become for years to come or for like pieces to come for anybody. Like um, you don't have to think so narrow. Like we don't always have to use snare. We don't always have to use like slapsticks. Like there's so many different opportunities or like crotales. Like you can really just expand your palette when you find other items to create those sounds. So
Well, we're really excited for Series 4. Like we said, happy Earth Day 2022.
yeah,
Um, it has been such a pleasure having JaRon as one of our composers this year. All of the pieces that we've commissioned this series are going to be released, the official recordings this summer. So we wanted to meet during this Earth Day week with all of our composers and share just kind of what we've been up to. We're still out there. We're still doing the thing. And of course, none of it's possible without our amazing composers like JaRon. So JaRon, one more time, thank you. Thank you so much.
thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. This has been an honor and a dream, and I can't wait for you guys to hear this piece and see.
Definitely.
And hopefully, yes, I can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure to keep up with Green Vibes on all of our socials, as well as JaRon and our other composers, Shelby Scott and Aaron Houston. So keep up with everybody. And like I said, look back here soon enough this summer for some official Series 4 recordings. But for now, happy Earth Day, and we will see everyone soon.